Here we go.
What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads and fathers that's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care, and being part of that collaboration in 2022 and 2021 reached out directly and indirectly to over 100,000 fathers around the world, and we're still doing it. So not only giving the past, but also giving the present. So, as always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And today is another episode of Black Canada Talking, which is an live online event that provides Black Canadians the opportunity to give their takes and POVs on stories that are important to them. So today, we've got one friend we see every once in a while. He's moved from Ottawa to Toronto. Well, I don't know where he's living right now. He's working in Toronto. I think he's still living in Ottawa. But we also, have also a new friend on the line. So let's get a little backdrop before we get into this conversation. A Black Canadian Civil Society Coalition who attended and participated in the first UN session on the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent in Geneva on December 5th to 8th, 2022, have contributed to policy recommendations towards achieving full human rights for people of African descent in Canada. The coalition will be making now a second visit to the UN Permanent Forum for People of African Descent in New York on May 30th to June 2nd, which is like in 2 days' time, to share their policy recommendations and work with others to promote and protect the critical objectives of the UN International Decade of People of African Descent, which is closing down. Hopefully it'll continue, but it's closing down. So we have at least two new friends. Well, one friend who's back and another new friend today. So like to do, hello, Hodan. Hello, Richard. What's going on?
All is good. It's great to see you, Dr. Vibe.
Good to see you. What city are you in today?
Today, my journey takes me to Toronto, and I'm going back to Ottawa. So just a quick business trip out here to see all these good Black folk that live and work out here in the other nation's capital.
Okay, no problem, Hodan. First time we've had you here. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Nice meeting you, Dr. Vibe. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation.
Absolutely looking forward to it also. In my tradition, love to have ladies first. So can you give a little background about yourself? And then we'll get Richard to update what he's been up to. So ladies first.
All right. So my name is Hodan. I'm a UN Fellow for the Decade for People of African Descent. So my role primarily is to advocate for the decade and for the three key pillars: recognition, development, and justice within Canada, and to kind of advocate for the Canadian government to acknowledge some of the long-standing human rights issues and address it directly pertaining to people of African descent, as the UN calls it, and we call it Black Canadians or Black people in Canada in this country. So primarily that is really very much my role: an advocate, a policy promoter, and just working with Black civil society, such as Richard, and in terms of making sure that we are engaged in the decade, as well as the work of the decade. And now we have the UN Permanent Forum to engage directly with the UN Permanent Forum as a body, but also the members and the policy recommendation that we would like to see on the global stage.
Wonderful. Welcome and thanks for being here. Richard, what's been going on? Well, you do have to give some of your background. Some people have seen you once in a while, but I know things have changed since the last time we've had this platform with you on it. So do share what's been going on in your world.
Yeah, so I think the last time I was on the show was last fall to support a conversation around the first permanent United Nations Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. It was a pretty historic event. and I was just transitioning actually over to the Ontario Public Service, leaving from the federal government, where I had been working on addressing anti-Black racism and the forms of discrimination of the Department of Justice Canada. I moved over to the Ontario Public Service, where I am leading something called the Black Equity Branch to address anti-Black racism within the Ontario Public Service. A huge task, given that there are 65,000 people working here, and there are over 6,500 Black people. That's 10% of the population with issues. So that's really been taking up the bulk of my time. How I met this wonderful young woman, Hodan, was last summer when they tapped me on the shoulder to re-engage in some work around the UN decade for people of African descent. As some people may know, I have been a part of something called the UN Decade for People of African Descent Push Coalition, which is a group that was pushing for a number of initiatives to be driven through the federal government to support the advancement of people of African descent in this country. When Hodan and other UN fellows, actually, who are in Canada and abroad, reached out to myself and other folks as civil society representatives to help in engaging in this process of actually building something at the UN specifically for people of African descent, specifically for Black people. So I was really excited to go in December of 2022, along with Hodan and I think it was maybe around 12 or so people from Canada to engage at the UN. And we wanted to talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit about the future of the work, which takes us to basically Tuesday, when the second meeting at the UN is going to be taking place with at least 1,000 people from all over the planet who are focused on addressing systematically issues that are specific to people of African descent globally.
Wonderful. Thanks, Richard. Before we get into, there's just some preliminary questions I want to ask, but I want to know, Hodan, how does one become a UN fellow?
That's a good question. So the UN Fellow was established in 2015 when the United Nations, specifically the Human Rights Commission of the UN, established this fellowship. When the decade was recognized, and they felt that they should have fellows representing different countries around the world. It wasn't just Americas as a continent or Europe, but also any person who's of African descent or Black descent can really participate as a UN fellow, to be engaged directly within the decade, to understand the mechanism of the UN human rights bodies, the human rights different levels of institution within the UN as a complex body that represents all nation states, and in the hope that they will go back to their home country and re-engage with their respective government and civil society about the decade, but also areas that impacting people of African descent that hasn't really been addressed. So that is really how the fellowship was established. So you actually apply, and so you basically, the deadline was actually May 15th. And so, and you apply, I applied, and I was accepted, and in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. And so it was, we didn't get the chance to go to Geneva, because the point is for you to actually go to Geneva, stay there for over a month, really immerse yourself in the UN body institutions and all the different committees and operation. We learned all of that online, and it's kind of funny because we're the most active, with the exception of Vanessa Fels. She was the first Canadian UN fellow, actually. I don't know how many Canadian were in 2015, and many of you are familiar that she's used to lead the UNDPAD, the Nova Scotia coalition. And so, but yeah, so we were, that's how it really came about, to put it in a very brief way. I can definitely share the link, and you can just share that with your audience as well.
Fantastic. So Richard, before we get into what happened a few months ago, can you give us some little background? I know it, Hoda knows it, but some people may not know about give a little overview of the UN International Decade for People of African Descent.
Oh yeah, that's I think that's really important. So I think it was in 2013 that the UN issued a declaration to support to support a decade to people of African descent. And that decade is to address issues of historic injustices, challenges that are still facing Black people across the globe, and to focus on ways of addressing three pillars of the decade. First being recognition of the importance of it, and recognition of the contributions of Black people to everything that we have here. It's the cradle of civilization, the beginnings of civilization on the continent. Justice and the pursuit of justice, and not just through civil rights, so-called civil rights or human rights initiatives within particular nation states, but globally, through even in Canada, through our institutions. Do we see justice for our natural justice for Black people in Canada and other parts of the world? And the third being development. So as Walter Rodney would say back in the day when he was alive and doing his work, African nations or countries where African nations that comprise Black people, for want of a better expression, have been underdeveloped and have not been able to reach their true potential, either socially, economically, politically. And so the development piece of the UN decade gives us an opportunity globally to look at ways in which we can improve the standing and improve the lives of Black people across the diaspora. So in a nutshell, that's really what the UN decade is about. It gives us an opportunity to work both internal to Canada and in other countries to address the issues of anti-Black racism, systemic, endemic, institutional anti-Black racism, the manifestations of white supremacy that really deny us of personhood, of our rights, of full citizenship in these countries, and gives us an opportunity to get together through this permanent forum with people of like minds to talk about a strategy, talk about an international sort of legal framework under which we can continue to do this work and bring this back to our nation states to keep up the good messaging and hopefully to continue to achieve progress. So yeah.
All right, fantastic. And we have a friend joining us. There he is. Definitely, I say one of the one of the foundations of Black Canada talking. Cesar, how are you, my brother?
I'm very good, brother. Very good. Sister Hodan, brother Richard, brother Dr. Vibe. Thank you for having me. Thanks for being here. My friends, this is what happens when you have many email addresses. I had already sent a message to Dr. Vibe and Richard about the email link. So, no, thanks for being here. And I mean, please go on. Great conversation.
No. I want you to just give a little short intro to yourself, and then we'll flow back in the conversation. So, a little bit about yourself, please, to our family.
Thank you so much. Cesar Ndema Moussa, Eastern Ontario Regional Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity, President of Roots and Culture Canada, and awardee of the Martin Luther King Jr. Lifetime Achievement Award, national in Canada for 2023, and one of the 9 human rights consultant awardee for 2022 by the United States Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights. So, and a proud panelist on the Dr. Vibe Black Canada Talking, and supporting the cause of our brothers and sisters.
Absolutely. You didn't think I was not going to force you to say that, because I know you don't like doing that, but I got to force you, brother. You're doing a lot of great stuff. So thank you for that. So Richard, let's take it back. What went on at the first meeting of this organization?
Well, you know what, I think I can start off, but definitely allow Hodan to also join the conversation, because she was there as well. But in early December, we went as civil society members at the invitation of UNESCO Canada to participate in the first permanent forum. And I think that what we did, and many other nation states representatives, not state representatives, but civil society representatives, and that means community representatives, what we did really was to help paint the story of what life and what the realities are for Black people in our respective countries. So in Canada, we did, for the Canadians, we actually made a big splash on the first day by letting people know that although there's good things happening in Canada, there's still a lot of work. And, you know, everything's not all rainbows and unicorns here on the north of the 60th parallel. So we spent a couple of days not only engaging at the main event, the main hall, where we had about 600, in between 600 and I think 800 people would be flowing in over the course of a couple of days, but also conversations outside of the forum with both state representatives from places like Barbados, Kenya, other African nations, Western nations. I'm talking about ways in which we could work together to address anti-Black racism, not only here within Canada, but also in supporting them in terms of some of the strategies and approaches that we held. There were a number of side events, some excellent side events actually, with representatives of the UN fellows from around the world, as well as you know, bringing together other groupings of people who took the advantage and took the opportunity to share information, share strategies, and I think the most part is probably one of the most important things is to sort of commiserate with each other on issues that are almost identical across the globe for Black people in the public service, Black people in over policing, prison systems, healthcare, education. You would be surprised that when I almost talking to almost anybody else in all of the very different languages that people are speaking. So I think 6 languages are being spoken and communicated on in those big sessions. So everybody's got headphones on. You'd be surprised at how much all those issues are almost identical. The Black experience is a universal one. So I found that the experience was excellent. Many of us spoke our truth and were able to share with other nation states and continue the work to this day. In particular, the great work that Hodan and the other UN fellows are undertaking to engage us in our countries, to do like the really good work, not the performative stuff that some would focus on, but the stuff that really focuses on institutional change. So maybe I could pass it on to Hodan, and I apologize to my brother Cesar because I didn't send the link directly to the right email. That was my fault. I was sending it all over the place, but I'm glad you made it, my brother. So,
Hodan, share some of your experience of the first meeting, the first gathering.
I think the first gathering, it was for one, a way to engage and develop relationship and networking opportunities with other Black people around the globe. Because as a UN fellow, we have so many other UN fellows around the world. So it was good to connect with friends from Mexico, from Panama, from Brazil, from China. So having a lot of people at UN fellows and to come in and to engage, and even finding out other UN fellows that I didn't even know existed from Spain and whatnot. And that was really an opportunity to engage with each other, to develop that, a better way of saying it is a fellowship, really, that fellowship, brotherly and sisterly fellowship, but more of a strategic fellowship to address our common goals, which is to really address the human right, the full realization of human rights for people of African descent. It was also a way to, for the first time, to meet so many people that I've been online with, specifically the UN Permanent Forum members, Michael, and so many others, and Ambassador Kimani from Kenya, you know, Mr. Huang from China. So like really meeting a lot of the members that I've only known online when I was introducing them to civil society, such as Richard, or to the government, for that matter. So it was really an opportunity to kind of meet face to face, to engage with each other, to have a conversation, and to observe what are some of the recommendations that were emerging out of the floor, and what recommendation can we also contribute. And as Richard alluded to, we did make a splash in the sense that we were not allowed to speak on the floor for a while. because Canadian voices have been overtaking other voices. So it took like 2 days for them to let us speak. And they only let us speak because I had to email the secretariat and the president of the forum and say, hey, why are you blocking us, right? It's not fair. And so, yeah, it was really a great experience, one in which that allowed us to really come back and see how we can make it a Canadian lens, a Canadian focus in a policy document. And this is which were, for the past 3 months, we were working together on that, and a policy recommendation that I guess we will touch on here, but also will be publicly available as of Monday, which is tomorrow.
Fantastic. Cesar, I know enough about you that you wouldn't get involved in an initiative unless you were very passionate about it. So why are you giving your energies to this initiative? And why is it important to you and to us?
Excellent question, brother Dr. Vibe. First of all, brother Richard Sharpe, sister Hodan have laid the path. They have opened the path for those like me to come in for the first time on this venture. But it is important for all of us because, you know, the decade for people of African descent is ending next year. And we cannot end it as if the solutions and everything have been so much improved for Black people. Even when we take the year of, you know, like it was 3 days ago, we commemorated George Floyd, 3 years since his recorded murder. But the truth of the matter is police brutality has not ended, and in many countries has not even diminished per se. Socioeconomics in terms of Black people, notably post-COVID, have not improved. I mean, we're talking about inflation. Imagine for those who have the intersectionalities of Blackness and poverty along immigration status. So many issues for which, as president of Roots and Culture Canada, but truly as a person living in a Black body, it is important to take the opportunity to go on a bigger platform, a global platform, to work with others like-minded. Like-minded does not mean that we agree or we have to agree on everything. Like-minded means we have a genuine care and concern for the betterment of situations of Black peoples on the 4 corners of the world. I mean, I like to sometimes remind people that while Brazil is the country that has that contains the most Black people outside of Africa, the city of Guangzhou in China is where there are the most Black people in Asia. By Black, I mean of African descent. So this is a global conversation, even more global when we have Indigenous people here in Canada. Let's talk about Indigenous in Australia. The skin color increases to the discrimination that they felt, just as, and I mean, Dr. Vab, you heard me talk about this before, the fate of the Dalit, the bottom of the caste system in India. The Dalit who in the 70s created a movement called the Dalit Black Panthers, inspired by our brothers and sisters in America, in not only advocating for the civil rights and socioeconomic issues in India, but in a recognition that despite thousands of years of separation from the continent, they are Black. And the caste system is also a racist system. So what's the point of me being able to bring this historical information, me talking about presenting or conferencing or giving an EDI training to some government, public servants, etc.? It doesn't mean anything if I cannot come in solidarity and humility with my sisters and brothers from across the world. We share together, and to bring the African spirituality, Kepri, we renew our soul to stand up for our ancestors, for our people in the present, and for our children in the future. I am honored to be part of this venture, and I intend to do us proud. And doing us proud starts with notably listening to the realities of the others, because I can say I know because I read, but I want to hear from those who live it, from those who are there. So I'm going there as a great listener and hoping to bring my voice, my energy, my intellect to the collective good, to add that break to the Pan-Africanism and to the efforts initiative. It must succeed.
I'm glad you showed up.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you.
Good stuff. So, Richard and Hodan, after you left the first gathering, how did you feel, and what have you been doing from then until now in regards to this initiative?
You want to start off, Hodan, or you want me to start off first?
Start off. And Richard, go ahead.
Okay. So what we did, we realized the power and the impact of the work that we were doing. We saw the impact that us as Black Canadians had at the United Nations. It was significant. It was significant enough for folks to basically look to us to start helping to draft this policy paper that Hodan was talking about, but also to come back to Canada and be in a very targeted way, engage with folks around addressing some, in advance of the second and the third a UN Permanent Forum, the second that's taking place next week, and the third taking place at the end in the fall. The whole idea of coming up with an international charter for people of African descent is really taking hold. So to put that into context, it's kind of like we had a UN decade for the rights of Indigenous persons, and so in Canada, it ended up translating into what's called the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Persons, and a number of initiatives and sort of commitments made by the government of Canada to address the issues that Indigenous people face here. So our thinking is that in support of an international declaration on the rights of people of African descent, the human rights of people of African descent that are in many cases not being respected, as our brother Cesar has mentioned, all over the planet, the hope is that that translates into legal framework to support the work that takes place here. So a number of conversations have been taking place with civil society members, with government representatives, not with the screaming child that's in the background, with a number of people basically focusing on how we frame up the language of the ask. And so the ask for us, there are many asks that are related to the decade. An ask that's linked to this charter are specific things that will support our people here in this country and across the diaspora. Examples, like when I talked to the head of the consular affairs of Barbados in Geneva, they want to know how to address anti-Black racism in the public service. So we've been having conversations about how we've been doing some of that work in terms of what we can share, in terms of strategies and approaches that would work over there. And in turn, they would lend support to the whole idea of the policy paper that will be released probably tomorrow during a press conference by the UN Fellows. So it was really a fantastic opportunity for us to help build something, and again, in a more meaningful way than we usually see things being done. In many Western nations, there are activities that are put in place, like things for youth to keep them away from the police, or educational programs, but we don't have things that talk about structural change. So the policy recommendations, and when Hodan comes back, I think that this is what she will talk about, focus on things like true criminal justice reform. Canada is involved in a Black justice strategy. Well, how can we make that real? We have recommendations to support that. Things like having a commissioner, an anti-Black racism commissioner, or a Black equity commissioner, something that's institutional, that holds the government and other institutions accountable to address issues of anti-Black racism within our systems of government, of healthcare, of education, and so on. These are things that we would like to help present in a very structured format, in a legalistic format, if you want to call it that, that gets put on the public record and helps, like I said, to become the foundation for these kinds of not only conversations, but work to build out what many of us see as this declaration and charter that will have lasting impacts here on Canada. So last thing I wanted to say before I pass it on to maybe Cesar or yourself is that even though I'm not going this time around to the next week's forum, Cesar will be there, Hodan will be there, and dozens of people from the community who are, who even if they weren't working directly on the policy paper that is going to be released, they have been doing work in their own spheres to help advance this work in a way that helps us amplify the work. So Hodan is back just in time to talk maybe a little bit more. I stalled as long as I could, Hodan, until you got back, my sister.
Thank you.
Talk a little bit about the policy recommendations.
Oh, okay, very good. And so I think post the session, the first session of the UN Permanent Forum, we really wanted to produce evidence-based document that was very specific, that could be measured in what we wanted to say. And this policy documentation is really have 5 key recommendations. And the first recommendation addresses recognition, the pillars of the decade. And it's specifically looking at what Canada has promised, because when Canada recognized the decade as the only Western country to recognize the decade for people of the UN decade for people of African descent, and they promised that they will take a more of a holistic approach to address the human right for people of African descent, specifically Black people in this country. And that hasn't happened. And so this document is really a specific policy recommendation, a call out to engage with Black people in this country, but also directly to address the Canadian government and its failure to live up to its promises. And so those policy recommendations are calling on those promises to be fulfilled, whether it's having a more inclusive institution, as we know that the Human Rights Commission, the Canada Human Rights Commission, was accused by the government, their own government, that they've been violating, discriminating against Black employees within the organization, and that they are less likely to take up when there are human rights complaints from Black people. They are more likely to reject those complaints than to actually address it and listen to the evidence. And so we are looking at institutional, addressing systematic anti-Black racism, addressing sustainable developmental goals. What does that really look like from a Canadian lens? Canada is, I think, number 63 out of 160 countries. They lag behind in all the 17 objective goals of sustainable developmental goals except education. And you can't really address socioeconomic issues without really directly engaging people of African descent in this country, besides First Nation and Indigenous communities. We are looking at what does hate crime look like in this country. And Black people experience the most hate consistently since 2009, that the Canadian government, SAS Canada, have been recording hate crime in this country. Black people are #1 in experiencing hate crime. Yet there's no focus dealing with hate crime from an anti-Black racism lens. There are no policy, there are no legislation to address those. And we're also looking at youth, Black youth engagement, but youth engagement overall. And Candice will speak on that, because we do have a side event that will be live for anyone to join in if they can be in New York. But yeah, hopefully I covered all the key areas.
That and then some. Outstanding, outstanding. So we'll just take a little quick break here. For those who are watching, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and hit the notification button, because when you like it and hit the notification button, you'll get notified about conversations like this. You can also like the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook and LinkedIn. And I'm going to come to Cesar, especially because someone said this. They said, I'm glad Cesar showed up too. His introduction was truly inspiring. So Cesar, let me ask you something. Why do you feel there's been a lack of activity by the federal government when it comes to this initiative?
It's an excellent question, brother. It is one which I must say won't be pleasing to hear. We have to be first objective. The government of Canada, this current government, and this is not a matter of liberal or whatever you want to call it, in 2018, by recognizing the decade has done a significant step. When I say significant, it is not in terms of a check mark, it's in terms of on the world stage, legally recognizing systemic racism in Canada as a land. When you look, for example, in Ontario as a province, the Prime Minister Doug Ford has recognized there is systemic racism. Meanwhile, in Quebec, the Prime Minister François Legault still denies it. So when you ask why have they done so little, unfortunately, Canada still enjoys its postcard image, to use the words of former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, the best, if not the 3 best, if not the top 10 best countries to live in, where, of course, the plight of Indigenous people is hidden, and the true realities about being an African Canadian, an Afro-Canadian, a Black Canadian, whether one be descended from slavery from the United States, but also slavery from Canada, or one is a direct descendant, first generation, second or third, from immigration in the Caribbean or in Africa. The statistics are still very clear when it comes to the statistics in terms of socioeconomics, just as political representation and power. All the aspects of statistics of what matters in terms of, in social science, what is called the social capital, from birth to the very aspects of what has one being part of a community that is respected. I did not say feared, a community that's respected by those in power and respected by other communities. Unfortunately, our current government, and this is not about Trudeau, because before he was the government of Harper, and he was the very same thing. The government still speaks more than it acts, and as such, when actions come, too often it is, let me be nice. It is well intended. Unfortunately, it is misguided. It is misguided in terms of the very reality on the ground, where Canada is a land of great opportunity to truly become democratic. And democratic means Indigenous rights, Black people rights, just as other minority rights. But we still cannot live in a country in 2023 that claims to be a champion of democracy and human rights, as they like to say to the world, and yet we have refugees from Ukraine getting the red carpet treatment. Meanwhile, the refugees who are brown and Black, either they're still waiting back home or they're definitely not getting a red carpet treatment. These are the consequences of white supremacy. These are the consequences of systemic racism. These are the consequences of the very dynamics of society where, to give him his dues, because, you know, I gave him the respect for that, where we have a prime minister who apologized himself for having done blackface. This was not 50 years ago or 30 years ago. This is the continuation of a system and of a culture that basically makes it that ultimately, as one of our heroes, Malcolm X, but also all the others who are standing behind me, we have to come together as a community connected to other Black communities worldwide to develop ourselves, to not wait for just government grants or government money, but to generate ourselves a power relation that is built on respect of our Blackness. Black people are respected as individuals, some, many, but as a group, as a collective, Black people worldwide are not respected. This is why, as a group, Black people, just as a continent, Africa and Caribbean nations are not respected. These are power relations based on identity.
Richard, I see why you brought him on. Okay.
So we have to say these things, right? We have to say these things. We cannot. Yeah. We will be making a sham, a mockery of ourselves as public servants, as professionals, as activists, as human beings, to take the time of a platform such as not just the United Nations, but Dr. Vibe, the Dr. Vibe show, and not come and bring the realness when it's time to get real.
Yeah, I have to jump in. I have to agree with that. Cesar provides the foundation for a lot of the grounding of why and how this work is important and why we're doing what we're doing. And so him being part of this work, moving to the UN and others just like him, kind of almost guarantees success in translating not even just the theory of that knowledge, but translating that into action. So, I mean, and people know I'm an action guy. What are we going to do now that we know that things are bad and we know what the strategies are? How are we going to implement, right? So this gives us an opportunity to use, I don't want to say I'm using you, Dr. Vibe, but I'm using this platform. We're using this platform to engage with Black Canadians and allies around the importance of this work and how to continue working on, and how continuing to work on Black-led initiatives helps to ensure progress for Black people in our country and across the globe. The framing of this work in the policy recommendations, an academic-looking, almost legalistic-looking document, helps to concretize and validate this when it gets presented at the international community. I would encourage people not only to patch into the Dr. Vibe show, but also connect with us and our colleagues who will be in New York for the video and live presentation of that side event. I think there are a lot of people in Canada, in particular governments, who will probably be tuning in. There probably will be more government people tuning in than regular community members because of the importance of the work that we are engaging in. So I just wanted to sort of say that plug in terms of the next steps and why it's important for people to go. This is not just an opportunity for officials to go and make music videos about how nice it is to go and walk through the halls and all that, because that's what we usually get, that they were there and they represented. But we actually want to build something. And the building something oftentimes has to come from community if it's going to be real, if it's going to actually be meaningful, if it's going to have impact on our lives. Because a lot of what we've been seeing over the last couple of years have, like I said, have been performative. And we can't afford to get to the end of the decade. We cannot afford, I'll say it again, we can't afford to get to the end of the decade with a couple of programs being funded by governments and a couple of activities being done, and then people kind of rubbing their hands and washing their hands of the sort of systemic and endemic work that we need to do, right? So I think that what we're trying to do, and I think what we're being successful in doing in rallying troops from the international community, is driving momentum around, again, framing this in a way that we must be, as Cesar says, respected as leaders in this space doing this work. It's a no-brainer. It's happening as we speak, and I think that I see good things coming out of the forum over the next week.
Okay, so just take another break here. We're broadcasting a part of this audio-wise and just my face on Instagram Live. I want to shout out to people like Fitnets IQ, T_more_, Rhonda.im joins in, Real4_the_truth join, the Real Anne Marie, I hope I got that right, and Blue Goddess Sesco. So you're watching or listening to the Dr. Vibe show called Black Canada Talking today, and we got some comments here. So there's a comment from Robin Brown, the 613-819 Hub will be joining Richard Hodan and Cesar as part of the Canadian Civil Society delegation. Our goal will be to disrupt the narrative of the Canadian Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat that's having a meeting with Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. to promote the North American Partnership for Equity and Racial Justice, saying it will help combat the anti-Black racism in North America. However, the North American Partnership document doesn't even mention Black people, let alone anti-Black. And then question, I'm glad it came up. How do you tune into the presentation?
If you want to tune into that presentation, it's going to be on Wednesday, May 31st at 6 p.m. I can share with Dr. Vibe
Yes,
And
if we could,
link.
what I'll do is, yeah, I could do a quick Instagram live or live, just giving people the information on the
Perfect.
link. So, or if you want, if you click on private chat and click on and put the
I
link
can do
there, I
that.
can put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do it live. So while
Okay.
you're doing that, Hodan, let me ask, what are you bringing, or what are your mindset going into this second meeting, and how is it different than the mindset you brought into the first meeting?
I think the mindset that we brought into the first meeting, or I personally brought into the first meeting, was more of listen, observe, speak where there was a need for me to contribute, and to build that network, to build that connection. In this second stage, or the second session, yes, we still continue to build that connections. There are over almost 50 Black Canadians who would be attending this UN Permanent Forum second session. I think we have the largest civil society coming out of a country in the Americas. I could be mistaken, but I do. And it is a privilege to honestly be able to do so, because I know people coming from Guyana, from Haiti, from Brazil are not able to financially be there, right, to that level of presence. So this is a privilege for us when we are in this space to engage with other Black civil society around the globe and to build that kind of allyship and to see where we can work together on the moment within that week, but beyond as well. I think that would be my mindset, to see how can we build some kind of attraction, a legacy that we can continue post the second session. And so that is one. The other one is this specific and second session is critical, because the third session in the fall is where state countries at the General Assembly will vote on the recommendation that comes out of this second session. And so my mindset is for us to have a very clear, precise policy recommendation that could be adopted at the United Nations level, at the General Assembly, can also be discussed and activated at the Human Rights Council in a way that is globally impacting people of African descent. And more importantly, there is a UN Human Rights Declaration. There will be a charter, what we call a legally binding document. And that is the Human Rights Declaration for people of African descent that is being worked on as we speak, that would be finalized and voted on in the fall. And Canadian government are against that declaration, specifically declaration that has a legal obligation on nations to abide by, because the more watered down declaration it is, the less likely it would have an impact for people of African descent, because it is going to be a legally binding document, similar to the UN Declaration for Indigenous People that came out of the UN Permanent Forum for Indigenous Issues. A lot of the content in the declaration was adopted by the Canadian government. They had to address it from a domestic point of view. And so that is a similar thing that we want to see. So really my mindset is to ensure that declaration is strong, to ensure that collectively all of us are engaged in the process as civil society consulting on this, and to put pressure on our government to not vote against it or to try to water it down in a way that it doesn't have the impact that we're looking for people of African descent.
Fabulous, Cesar. This is the first time you're going to this gathering. What is your mindset going into this event that's happening in the next 2 days?
If I may give an example, because absolutely my first time, I dare to try to compare it to 2007 when I attended the European Parliament oratory competition, and as so often as a Black person in white spaces, I came in there telling myself, oh, I hope I'm not the only Black person. And of course, I was the only Black person in Paris out of 120 universitarians selected worldwide. I am glad I'm going in 2023 to New York at the United Nations. I'm going to be one of hundreds of Black people, from what I'm understanding. So where my mind is at is, are we coming there with necessarily the best intentions, or some of us are coming with the intention of making the government not look too bad? Because I am never, and I know knowing Brother Richard, having gotten to know Sister Hodan, notably through email, so first time we see each other, I like to believe that those that I walk with, I include Brother Robin Brown, Sister Ketsia Peters, are fair. But fairness is to also be able to beat your hand on the table to demand more from our governments. To demand more from our governments that write charters of freedom and rights. To demand more from our governments that too often when it comes to our people like to claim they don't have solutions or they don't have the funds. But if you bring them the right context that includes non-Black people, suddenly the solutions and the funds are there. And when I say solutions, I'm talking long-term. I'm going there with a mindset of Pan-Africanism, of course, always. But I'm also going there very truly in a spirit of, how can I put it? A spirit where we're not going there to fight with swords or guns in our hands. We're going there with our minds, we're going there with our heart, and we're going there with our mouths. But as Sister Hodan said, as Brother Richard said, it has to be that we go there constructively. It's not some Instagram social media event for nice photos per se. It is not just a matter of connecting to expand our network or LinkedIn, whatever you'll call it. We have to be able to go there and to be productive, because this is beyond us in the moment. This is about those who will come after us. This is about even those who, even if they are there and they may not have, let's say, the best approaches or mindsets or be as critically analytical as we would like to see. It's also about them. I like to remind people, I was giving a conference, I was giving a training, I think maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago, in which I remind people that a brother like George Floyd would not have been my friend when he was alive based on some of the things that we discovered about his life. But it's not because of whatever he did or his past or his character. It's because he was Black, he's my brother. Because he was victimized as a Black person. Because I can be the next George Floyd. Sister Hodan can be the next Sandra Bland. And even a certain Barack Obama can be the next George Floyd, just as Sister Oprah Winfrey can be the next Sandra Bland. At the end of the day, the first thing, and it's hard for a lot of Black people to accept it in the age of integration where a lot of things seem to be blurry and gray. But on the four corners of this world, the first thing that unites and connects us, unfortunately, in this world of white supremacy, is our skin color. So we must do better. We must come collectively and constructively to do better.
Excellent. So a few things, housekeeping. Those on Instagram, we're going to let it go. We're going to shut it off. If you want to catch the full conversation, go to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and you catch the full conversation. Thanks for stopping by. Remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. So, Richard, we're going to let you close it off, but there's a few questions that are come here that we need to have addressed. So first things first, I'm going to say hello to Dr. Tachi, who hosts the livest online show about media, tech, and pop culture on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. on Instagram and then 6 p.m. Eastern time. She has it on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, etc. And also a lot of the content that you're watching on the Dr. Vibe show is going to be on her new network that she is launching, I believe, on January 16th. So I know she'll want this conversation on there. So as you wanted, Richard, it's getting out to a wider community, especially down south. So you got that happening. Robin is asking or saying one of the recommendations from the first meeting is extending the decade for another 10 years. And he is also asking, can you talk about how the Halifax Declaration relates to the UN Declaration on People of African Descent? I'll leave that one to you, Richard.
Okay, and so I've got to catch my train, so I'm going to talk really quick.
No problem.
First, on the Halifax Declaration, I think the Halifax Declaration is one of those things that has received endorsement and contributions from people all over the country at the National Black Canadian Summit, and the work that the Michael Jean Foundation has done over the last 6 years to culminate into that declaration. I think it feeds into what we're doing in a really good way. And I know that they're going to have a side event at the UN, which I'm hoping will also be televised, that we can also patch into. There's lots of work that's taking place from different angles to focus on the same thing. All of these different declarations, all this work can build into an international declaration on the rights of people of African descent. A couple of things really quick. One, I think we have to recognize that when people are going to the UN, not all skin folk are kinfolk. Not everybody's going to be there for the same reasons. People that are getting paid by the state oftentimes have different objectives than those who scrapes to get there however they could so they can make a difference. So I think we need to take that into consideration, that even though we're all going to be there and we have a lot of people going from all over the world, there are different objectives, and so the questions and the impact that I'm recommending that people make as part of that disruption that Robin talked about at some of these other events is actually talk about accountability, talk about outcomes, and challenge our representatives and our community folks that are there to talk about how we plan to achieve concrete, measurable outcomes and results for our people within our various member states, and in particular Canada, which is of particular focus to us. If we do that, I think we'll come back to Canada with something a little bit, everybody will come back to Canada with more, I would say, intentionality and ambition to do what's right for Black people in this country. And if we do right for Black people and Indigenous in this country, all racialized groups and Canadians benefit. So I think that, again, really looking forward to this. Again, Dr. Vibe, I thank you very much for this platform. It gives us an opportunity to reach many people.
I just want to interrupt you real quick. How can people find out more about what we're doing, what you're doing here?
On the UN Permanent Forum?
Yes.
So we're going to be reaching out during and after through Hodan and through our member organizations to you and others. We've kept the policy paper has been kept a little bit close, so it's going to be released the day before the event takes place. But absolutely, we're gonna reach everybody and give people contact information so that they can reach us. So I don't have that right now, partly because I'm not going.
No problem. Go catch your train. Go catch your train.
All right. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
All right, then. Take care.
Okay,
Richard. So I want to say thanks to everyone who joined on the conversation here. Let me just make sure Richard gets out. Richard. Yes. Okay. That is done. I want to say thanks to both of you for taking the time and sharing with us today. Hodan, you have been so great because you've given us some information. So there is the event link for the event. Copy it down. And also you can also register in advance. It's a big long link, but you can register in advance for it, and looking for it. And actually there's a lady that I know that's involved with it too. Candice Cupshaw. I know that lady. Yes. So she's been doing a lot of stuff with UN work also. So any final words either one of you would like to share with us today?
I think what I would say in terms of the policy recommendation that will be released, we will take this document and to the UN Permanent Forum next week, but we'll also bring it back that we really want to have a conversation among everyday Black people, the more, and also with Dr. Vibe. So we'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Engage and to really kind of broaden the conversation, because I don't think there's enough Black people who know even about the decade, let alone the UN Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. And I will say that the UN Permanent Forum is what a lot of people have advocated for. And I think by and large is the advocacy of people from the Caribbean, from Latin America, are really what made both the decade as well as this permanent forum possible, with our support as UN fellows and other Black Canadian activists. And so I'll say engage, because this permanent forum can only function and can only be strong if we are engaged with it and also putting pressure on the Canadian government to fund it properly, but to also support it and engage with us as Black civil society.
I love that. Bless you, whoever sneezed there, by the way. Engagement. I heard that. So I love that. Engagement and pressure. Cesar, any last words?
Brother Dr. Vibe, thank you as always for giving us this opportunity. Thank you to our sisters and brothers who watched, who contributed. Thank you so much to Sister Hodan, because I can really say Richard, they're the captains of our teams. So we go in there in a spirit of team. Very true. Not all kinfolk are kinfolk, but in the spirit of our ancestors, our people have gone through so much. Our people are going through so much. And in this century, which is said a century where African demographics, I didn't say Black, African demographics will make it that by, I think, 2050 or 2100, 1 human out of 3 or out of 4 will be African. We cannot fail. We must advance, even if it's just one step at a time, one brick at a time, but we must advance. A platform such as the United Nations is one where we absolutely will represent our people here in Canada, our people worldwide, to go further in our rights, in our dignity, and in the honor of our ancestors and the future of our children. Absolutely.
That's a done deal. Thank you, Cesar. Thank you, Hodan. And remember to give yourselves grace, and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. All right. And Robin Brown has been so kind to put up the schedule for this event. So there you go. So if you want to get this meeting schedule, and what I will do is I'll hopefully take this information, put on a post, or if Hodan can supply it to me, that'd be great. So that is it for today. Thank you so much again for everyone who chimed in. Also want to thank FitNance IQ Cam jumping over from IG, Instagram, to watch this on YouTube. So this is how we close out. Oh, actually, I got to say this. It's been scrolling at the bottom. You can watch replays of the Black Canada Talking on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Just put in the Dr. Vibe Show. And also you can go to my website, thedrvibeshow.com. If you want to touch base with me, there are all the deets. There's a website, email address, dr.vibe@thedrvibeshow.com. YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, The Dr. Vibe Show. Twitter, @drvibeshow, and Instagram, @thedrvibeshow.com. This is how we ended off on all the conversations, all the epic conversations that I host. So this is what we do. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourselves grace, and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. God bless. Peace be all. Keep the faith and walk good. Yeah.